목소리.
Alright, so get this. Earlier this year, I made a video where I covered a handful of some of the absolute worst PS3 online games. While digging for the catacombs of the PS Triple, I ended up coming across a handful of some obscure, crappy games that I guarantee a lot of you guys watching this video right now never even knew existed. So in today's video, I'll be exploring some of the more lesser known stinkers on the PS3. From playing a game that was created in under 9 months to revisiting one of the worst last gen ports on the console. This is exploring scuffed PlayStation 3 games. Alright, so for the first game that I'll be going dumpster diving straight into is this one called Smash and Survive. Now, Smash and Survive was this obscure PSN exclusive that was released way back in the golden era that was 2012. It was created by a studio called Version 2 Games, a game development company that was based in India. Fun fact, Smash and Survive was the first Indian-developed PlayStation 3 game to be released globally. Back on topic, Version 2 Games describes Smash as a vehicular combat game that takes heavy inspiration from the likes of Carmageddon and Twisted Metal. According to a dev interview that Push Square published leading up to the game's release, Version 2 was hyping this game up to the high heavens, blowing more smoke than Cypress Hill, claiming that would be the marquee title that puts India on the global game development map. And to quote the developers themselves, they say, "Expect a mind-blowing adventure game next to which will have visuals on par with the world's best games and the gameplay that is totally unique." If you grew up in North America, then there's a good chance that you probably never heard of this game before, since it was never released outside the European market. And I gotta admit, locking content based on where you live in the world kinda sucks. Thankfully, it doesn't always have to suck, as you can use NordVPN, today's video sponsor, to bypass this silly restriction, giving you access to games, movies, TV shows, and whatever floats your boat content that isn't normally available in your region. NordVPN is like the bee's knees when it comes to keeping you safe online. With a simple click of a button, not only does it create a virtual private network that encrypts your connection, keeping your personal information safe from bad actors, but it also protects you from phishing scams as well as malware-infested websites. And best of all, it's supported on all major platforms. NordVPN also has this built-in dark web monitor that continuously scans the dark web to check if your private information is being sold online. I took a gander and tried it out for myself, and it turns out that my information was leaked 25 times in the past decade. This feature alone saved me precious time and a massive headache. NordVPN offers 3 different plans that you can choose from as well. You got the standard package, which just includes the VPN service, the Plus package that includes both the VPN plus the NordPass, a handy password manager that generates passwords and stores them inside a secure vault, or you can opt for the complete package that includes both the VPN, NordPass, as well as what's called the NordLocker, a secure cloud storage service that keeps your files encrypted while making them fully accessible anywhere in the world on any of your devices. All this is backed by NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee on all your purchases. You gotta love it. You can snag yourself a huge discount plus 4 extra months with every 2-year plan purchase just by using nordvpn.com/mach3. I'll leave a link to it as a pinned comment as well as in the description of this video. Thank you once again to NordVPN for supporting and sponsoring the channel. Alright, so Smash and Survive surprisingly has a good amount of content to choose from considering its budget price tag. You got a campaign mode with 19 playable missions, 5 game modes, including split-screen multiplayer, as well as giving you around 30 cars to unlock. Speaking of which, you can choose from driving the Skunk, Gator, Screw, the She, Jed Speed, Gabrilla, Bip Daddy, Leap Ting, and the Supra. Yeah, Supra my ass. I like how instead of using a font, the devs instead opted to draw out each vehicle's name by using the paintbrush and MS Paint. It's not awful by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just kinda goofy, man. Now back onto the topic of the campaign, despite offering 19 missions, the whole single player portion of the game is basically just a bunch of random maps and game modes thrown in together. The game does try to tell somewhat of a story, but to be completely honest with you guys, it's all over the place and ends up feeling more like a bird's nest. From what I could tell, I guess you join a group called the Necromancers where you have to fight against the Hoonigans, and that's basically it. Outside of that, there isn't any sort of context to the who, what, where, and why of Smash and Survive. But if you ask me, games like this don't necessarily need any sort of strong narrative or plot for that matter, so I'll give it a pass in this case. If there was one thing that Smash and Survive has going for it, it's just just how surprisingly well the cars handle in this game, as there's a decent amount of weight to each vehicle to where each one feels noticeably different from each other, and the drifting mechanic is balanced enough to where it's easy to pick up and play but hard to master. It kind of reminded me of playing one of those 3D Flash games that you would find on websites like Miniclip from back in the day. What kills all this goodwill though is the nasty amount of input delay that each vehicle has. Like whenever you move your steering wheel, there's an ever so slight 1-second delay to all your actions, which is not only just a pain in the Johnson to deal with, but makes the whole game fall flat on its face. What also doesn't help matters here is just how ass backwards the combat system is in this game. To put it bluntly, it's just atrocious. The biggest issue with it is just how bare bones the whole experience is. You simply point your car at whoever you're facing, run into them multiple times, until the game prompts you to finish them off. Rinse and repeat, and Bob's your uncle. There's little to no feedback to any of your actions, it lacks any sort of depth, and it's about as shallow as a YouTuber's apology video. What makes this even worse is how whenever you attack someone, you also take damage yourself. This means that if you're ever in a situation where you have to kill the other team in order to progress and you only have 1 bar health left, it's basically game over. To the game's defense, it does at least give you some weapons that you can use, like being able to put spikes on your car or even shoot flames, which is pretty cool, don't get me wrong. However, it doesn't really change the gameplay to a point where it makes any noticeable difference, rather just being there for show. I think if the developers had taken inspiration from the Burnout series and adopted a car destruction mechanic similar from that game, it would have made the gameplay in Smash and Survive a whole lot more fun to play without it feeling stale after 5 minutes. Well, at least in my opinion. Anyways, although Smash and Survive wasn't the smash success that version 2 had hoped for, I will give the team credit for at least trying to make something cool here. Is it great? No. Is it scuffed? Absolutely. But in a weird way, it almost adds to the experience, as it's one of those rare cases where the game is so bad that it's actually kind of fun to play. But here's the thing, Smash and Survive is just the tip of the iceberg, as there's so many other busted PlayStation 3 games out there. Like take for instance this one called Ari the One. Now Ari the One is a movie tie-in game for the 2011 Bollywood classic called Ari 1.
Just like Jackie Chan.
Not only is this game incredibly rare nowadays, fetching upwards to over $300 complete in box, but this was also a first-party published game by Sony themselves. If you guys thought that Concord was complete ass, wait until you see this shit.
Engaging enemy. Threat detected.
Truth be told, I've been looking for an excuse to cover this giant pile of doo-doo for quite some time now, so I thought to myself, why not? Let's go check this out. Alright, so Ari the One is made up of 3 different game modes: Campaign, Brawl, and Challenge mode. According to good old reliable Google, the campaign for Ari 1 takes around 3.5 hours to complete, with some people managing to speedrun through the entire game in under 40 minutes. While we're on the topic of the campaign, the plot surrounding Ari the One revolves around how Earth was taken over by this demonic group called the Ramen, if I'm saying that right. The few remaining survivors on Earth then move to, I shit you not, a vacation resort on the moon, and apparently they end up going back to Earth right after moving to the moon because they ran out of oxygen. And then someone appointed this dude named Ari1 as a warrior to save planet Earth. And that's all that I can make out, since the dude doing the voiceover work sounded like he was whispering his lines.
Destroying anyone who opposed him, and anyone left alive on Earth were mere slaves.
What's weird about the cutscenes in this game is how a lot of them are less than 10 seconds long, giving you zero context to whatever the f is supposed to be going on.
Erase your existence.
You have no chance.
Beauty can only get you so far.
Some of the cutscenes even last less than 5 seconds. I've seen Vine videos with better storytelling than this shit.
Threat detected.
The missions, if you want to call them that in Area of the One, are also pretty busted too. All of them take place inside multiple arenas, where you're either tasked with having to kill everyone on screen or surviving for 30 seconds. What makes these ass-tastic is the fact that the game recycles a lot of these missions over and over again. A great example of this is how I played on one mission where I had to fight 3 dudes in under 30 seconds.
Prepare yourself.
I'll show you, Overpower.
After you beat this mission, the next mission right after that has the exact same arena and objective.
I am on.
With the only difference being that you fight 1 person instead of 3. It's just lazy. And the thing is that this would have been somewhat manageable if the game was actually fun to play.
My powers unleashed! I didn't expect any better.
The best way that I can describe the combat in RA1 is that it feels like you're playing a stop-motion film.
I have lots of energy.
You can kick, punch, throw an
Energy blast!
all of which gets old after playing the game for more than 30 seconds. Although there are a handful of different characters that you can play as, it ultimately ends up feeling stale since all of them basically share the same moveset, making them feel practically identical to each other, which defeats the whole point of having them in the first place.
Energy blast!
What's also dumb as bricks is the fact that there isn't any sort of lock-on system in this game. This makes the combat 5 times worse since there's really no way to know if your hits are going to land or not.
My powers unleashed!
You end up feeling like you spend more time shadowboxing with yourself versus actually making progress. And considering just how fast-paced this game gets, it's asinine to think that someone sat down, played this for hours on end, and gave it the seal of approval.
What happened? Your gun's not working?
For shits and giggles, I went digging online to see if I could find any behind-the-scenes information regarding the development of Area the One, and I managed to come across this article that Yahoo published back in 2014, where they interviewed both the CEO of Trine as well as a few former employees who worked on the project. And it turns out that Area the One's development, to put it bluntly, was a complete shit show. The story goes that back in 2011, good old Jim Ryan mandated that Trine release the game to coincide with the film's release, only giving the studio 9 months to fully develop the game. Gupta, the CEO of Trine at the time, claims that one of the project's biggest hurdles wasn't only just the razor-thin deadline, but was also the fact that they couldn't find reliable talent in India. He shared this one story where apparently one of the lead programmers on Area the One decided to randomly take a 3-week vacation without telling anyone, which led to massive delays in meeting crucial development milestones. The developers on the project, however, share a different story. Although they would describe Gupta as a friendly boss, he was also known for being immature, brash, and impulsive. Even Gupta himself admitted to this, saying, "If I get mad, I just go to the computer, turn off the monitor, and tell the person to leave," which, by the way, is an illegal way to fire someone in India. Gupta also claims that despite the game's financial success, Sony refused to pay the studio its royalties, leading to some of the employees who ended up working on future Trine projects not getting paid for their work. One of the ex-employees was so pissed about the whole situation that he resorted to hiring a political party to quote-unquote rough him up, and would also call up his house, going as far as threatening his wife if they didn't get paid. It's worth noting that around this time, it was widely speculated online that Gupta took the money owed and bought himself a Ferrari with it, which definitely didn't help with his image. Now, there's a whole lot more to this story, like how the CEO flat out admitted that the game sucked ass, to how he was accused of defrauding the company, but that's a story for another day. Anyways, to put it simply, Area the One is hands down one of the most busted games on the PlayStation 3. I would not recommend playing this unless you really want to flush 3 hours of your life down the toilet like I did.
I have lots of energy.
Alright, so next up we've got a game that I guarantee you probably never heard of before. This is what's called World Hunter. Now, World Hunter is a PSN Store exclusive hunting game released by the studio called PSR Outdoors, a game development company specializing in creating the quote-unquote most realistic hunting simulations on the market. What's fascinating about World Hunter is that there isn't much information about this game on the internet. Even after digging through the catacombs of YouTube, all that I could find was this one gameplay video posted back in 2017, as if the game never existed in the first place. And honestly, after playing it, I can see why that's the case. Alright, so when you first boot up World Hunter, the game gives you two options, free play and campaign. I'll start with campaign first. Now, there's around 5 missions to choose from in World Hunter. You got Big Bad Bubba, Shooter Joe, Cool Hands, the Hunter, and Deer Slayer. Once you've chosen a mission, it drops you inside this cool lounge, where you can walk around it, select what type of guns you want to use for your hunt, and it even lets you go as far as choosing what camouflage that you want to use. The lodge itself is kinda cool, don't get me wrong, but it's also incredibly buggy, as you can only explore 1/4 of it without the game immediately crashing out, which kinda defeats the whole purpose of having the lodge in the first place. Anyways, once you figure out your loadout, you have to walk over to this TV and select what level you want to play on. Speaking of which, you got Canada, Argentina, and the United States, or New Mexico in this case. Both Canada and New Mexico take place inside what I believe is supposed to resemble what it's like to go hunting in the middle of the woods, and that's the only positive thing that I could think of when describing this map. Meanwhile, Argentina takes place during the day on this giant flat open field, filled with trees, tall grass, flower, and some bullshit thrown in for good measure. One goofy detail about Argentina is how the devs ripped what sounds like a gun sound effect from Counter-Strike Source and added it to the map's ambiance. I couldn't really tell what gun they sampled here, so I'll let you guys be the judge in this case. In terms of gameplay, this is where World Hunter starts to fall flat on its face. One of the first things that caught me off guard here was how the game controls. For God knows what reason, you move around the environment using the directional arrow pad on the DualShock 3, while you use the right thumbstick to look around. Meanwhile, the left thumbstick does absolutely nothing, with no option to map or change the control scheme. It's as if the devs developed the game with the N64 controller in mind. It's just so weird, man. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for experimenting with new ideas, but I just feel like this was a classic case of reinventing the wheel when you don't really need to. But the real question here is, was it like the play World Hunter? Well, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, yeah, it's just ass. I don't know how else to describe it. If I had to summarize it, the combat feels like you're playing an Adobe Flash game from 2005. The weapons have zero sense of feedback and lack even the most basic details, such as not having a muzzle flash for an example. Big Bad Bubba over here walks around the woods as if he's been bricked up for the past decade. The game's AI seems to be on a 365-day vacation, and the hit detection is more dodgier than having a sleepover at Titties. But here's the thing, the biggest issue of World Hunter isn't due to its bland visuals or the paper-thin gameplay. Rather, it's a fact that it's missing so many quality life features that one would expect from a video game. For example, this game has no pause menu, so if you hit the start button on the DualShock 3, nothing happens. Instead, if you want to back out of the level, you click the triangle button. What makes this even more dodgier is that by doing this, there's also a good chance that this will cause a game to instantly crash. And since the game lacks any sort of save system, this means that if you accidentally crash while backing out of the level, it's basically game over. You gotta start from the very beginning again, which is really scuffed. Fun fact, PSR Outdoors is still in business as of the recording of this video, with the studio dropping a brand new hunting game on the PS5 back in April this year. They even created this one game called Deer Simulator where you play as a deer who has to survive by breeding and fighting other bucks in the wild. It sounds pretty goofy, so if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a link to the PSN store listing in the description down below. Anyways, I wouldn't recommend playing World Hunter, nor would I say that it's worth the $7 price tag. If there was one takeaway here, it's that World Hunter gave me a new appreciation towards the older Cabela games, so there's that, I guess. Alrighty, so next up on the list, we have one of the worst last-gen ports on the PlayStation 3. I'm talking about Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor. Now, let me make one thing crystal clear. Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor is a phenomenal game and isn't awful by any stretch of the imagination. However, the fact that the PS3 port of this game was released in this much of a compromised state, and WB still had the gonads to charge full price for this piece of Gondorian shit is pretty wild if you ask me.
Another schrock that needs to be put back in his place.
Fun fact, the developers behind this port were none other than Behavioral Interactive, better known today for creating that small indie hit that you might have heard of called Dead by Daylight. The best way that I can describe Shadow of Mordor is that the game feels like it's being held together by popsicle sticks. When you first jump into it for the first time, the game greets you with a 1GB update, which is basically a red flag telling you that what you're about to play is absolutely beyond repair. Now at first, I didn't think this game was all that bad, to be honest. I mean, yeah, the visuals look like they've been, well, deep fried, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't consider it as awful. It's not until when you get past the tutorial missions and start to actually explore the open world is when the game really starts to fall apart. Let's start first with the frame rate. It's all over the place. When you're running for the fields of Mordor, it seems to hit an average of 22 FPS, which is pretty common for most PlayStation 3 third-party ports. The issue with this is that it seems to progressively get worse the longer that you play the game, with having to capture the strongholds being the worst offender here. It goes from being somewhat stable to turning into a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation in a matter of seconds. Even if you take more of a stealth approach over going guns blazing into a stronghold, the performance is still incredibly spotty, as there seems to be really no way to avoid it. I also don't normally mind screen tearing in a lot of games that I play on the PlayStation 3, but for some reason here, it's really noticeable, and at times it can also be nauseating to look at. It's kinda weird. If it wasn't for just how damn satisfying the combat is in this game, I don't think I would have had the patience or the balls to play through more than an hour of it. There's also been a ton of compromises here to the game's overall presentation. Stuff like how the lip syncing is little to non-existent.
When I'm done, you'll be begging to be put out of your misery.
Sometimes the audio will glitch out of nowhere. A lot of the animations look busted. To how they completely blue-balled the Nemesis system compared to its next-gen counterparts. On top of all this malarkey, if you want to view your map, you have to wait through a 10-second loading screen every time you close the map. This wouldn't be much of an issue for most games, but in an open-world action RPG where you rely heavily on using the map to figure out where the hell you're supposed to go, it becomes incredibly infuriating over time. From what I could find online, apparently the load times seem to get worse towards the end of the game, with some people even reporting that the load screens can last upwards to close to a minute at a time. You could probably dump your ass in the same amount of time it takes to load into the game. To the developers' credit, they did release an update after launch to help reduce long loading times, so it's not nearly as bad as it was at launch, but it's still not great either. But for what it's worth, I gotta say that it's pretty damn commendable that the devs still managed to get this game in this much of a playable state. They clearly tried their best to port the game over to what is essentially a potato, and I think if they had their own way, they would have either delayed the game or canceled it altogether. The fact that this game didn't crash once during my playthrough or set my PlayStation 3 on fire is pretty impressive if you ask me. The only person that I blame here is Warner Brothers, the game's publisher, since they're fully aware of the game's state and still mandated them to release it, despite it being a bastardization of the original experience. Warner Brothers clearly didn't learn jack crap from this whole debacle because less than a year later, they released that scuff Batman Arkham Knight PC port. A port so greasy in fact that Valve had to step in and physically remove it off the Steam store. Good riddance. Anyways, if you guys want my 2 cents, I would strongly recommend sticking to the PlayStation 4 version of this game as it's well worth your time and money. But before I end this video off, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the following YouTube members for their continued support. The following members are OG Newbie, Hurdy, Blake Love, The Ghost, Parapet Boy, Christy TM, Vanilla64, Magma Master 1801, Failing, Maddie's Gamer, Twin 10 brother, Mash Mallow, Bob Loves Cutie Pie, Burrito Yuzmaki, Kali X, Matthew Senis, No Name, PC Master Game Race, Max7, Mike_Ock, Timbo TK, Carlos the Bird 69.
I broke my controller.
Baba La Gaga, Duncan Lowry, Skate Punk, Liquid Snake, Jacob's Old Archive, Captain Zabu, Taylor Use Toxic, It's Chachaz, Dawn the Second, Ale Reznov, Pyra, Adam, Wade's Retro Revive, Ethan Phillips, Za, Time Tunnel 4956, Canadian Jelly, RIP, and Fruzilla. Thank you guys so much. It is greatly appreciated. And that was exploring scuffed PlayStation 3 games. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm planning on dropping at least 2 more videos before the new year, and I'm not going to spoil anything just yet, but what I will say is that they're pretty dope, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, if you enjoy this style of content, please consider leaving a like or even a subscription. It is greatly appreciated. But until next time, fellas, peace.
The landing wheels aren't retracting!
Yeah? And the number 2 nozzle won't work either.
What? Are you for real? We can't land
Well,
without them! I knew I should
whatever
have.
happens,
I'm only 18.
happens.
I don't want to